Imagine handing over your passport just to go, like, fishing for the weekend.
Right, which sounds a bit intense for a weekend trip.
Yeah, exactly. And then imagine waking up to find out that passport number is now in the hands of a cyber criminal.
Which is pretty much the ultimate nightmare scenario for your identity.
It really is. But the crazy part is, it didn't happen because the government agency you gave it to got hacked.
No, of course not.
Right. It happened because the invisible, software company they hired to process the transaction just basically left the digital backdoor wide open.
Yeah, and that mundane nature of this whole event is what makes it so incredibly dangerous for everyday consumers and for the enterprises they trust, honestly.
Today, for you, we are looking at a quiet catastrophe. I mean, there was no flashy ransomware demand here.
Right, no dramatic shutdown of a power grid or anything like that.
No. Instead, we're looking at a masterclass in the massive, staggering risks hiding in plain sight, specifically within the vendors and the suppliers that organizations use every single day.
We are dealing with a silent threat that completely bypasses, like, billions of dollars of internal corporate security.
And to guide us through how this actually happens, our deep dive today is based on a really sobering incident report. It's from Tech Talks with Kinsoft, published on June 19th, 2026.
That's a great source. They really break down the technical side of things well.
They do. And this report details a major supply chain breach involving the Texas Parks and Wildlife Department. But as we explore the details, you need to keep one thing in mind.
Right, it's not just about Texas.
Exactly. And it isn't just about parks. It is fundamentally about how the modern digital world is glued together behind the scenes.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because to really grasp the absurdity of a supply chain breach, I want to use a physical analogy.
I love a good physical analogy. Lay it on me.
So, imagine you have spent an absolute fortune securing your house. You've got a state-of-the-art alarm system, reinforced steel doors, shatterproof glass on the windows, the works.
Right, a total fortress. Exactly. You even have a biometric keypad just to get into the garage. Your house is impenetrable. But you go out of town for the weekend, and you leave a spare physical key with a house sitter so they can water your plants.
Uh-oh. I see where this is going.
Yeah. That house sitter casually drops your spare key on a public park bench while they're out for a walk.
And then someone just picks up that key, walks right past your biometric scanners and your shatterproof glass, and lets themselves right into your living room.
Exactly. All that money spent on your own infrastructure is rendered completely useless because of the person you trusted. I mean, you did everything right, but you're still the one who gets robbed.
What's fascinating here is that this physical dynamic is just a perfect mirror for modern digital architecture.
How so?
Well, in the digital world, that spare key is an API token or a shared service account. It's basically a piece of code that allows a vendor's software to automatically talk to a primary organization's database.
Right, so it's bypassing the front door completely.
Exactly. If the vendor mismanages that token, say, by storing it in an unencrypted server, a hacker just picks it up and walks right through the digital front door.
Wow.
So we are going to dissect the anatomy of this third-party vendor breach. We need to understand not just the mechanics of what happened in Texas, but why the security of these invisible platforms, the payment processors and the mailing houses we interact with every day.
The ones we don't even know exist.
Right. Why their security is secretly the most critical security layer of all.
To understand the sheer severity of an API token falling into the wrong hands, we have to look at the anatomy of the breach itself. Like, we really have to look at who was impacted and the specific type of data that the attackers walked away with.
Because the type of data completely dictates the severity of the fallout, right?
Totally. And the specific payload is the entire reason this incident is making waves in the security community. I mean, we're not talking about a standard credential stuffing list here.
No, not at all.
When I was reading the Kinsoft report, the scale of this stood out to me immediately. On June 18th, 2026, the Texas Parks and Wildlife Department disclosed that this breach affected exactly 3,087,721 people.
Over 3 million Texans caught up in a single event. That is just a staggering payload for a State Department.
Right.
Especially when you consider the depth of the profiles that were stolen.
Yeah, let's talk about that. Because the attackers acquired names, home addresses, phone numbers, and email addresses. Standard demographic data.
Which is bad enough on its own, but
critically, they also extracted government-issued IDs. We're talking about massive databases of driver's license numbers and passport numbers.
That is the real nightmare right there.
Now, the Kinsoft report does note one tiny silver lining. No social security numbers or financial account data were involved.
Okay, well, that's something, I guess.
I mean, sure, but the inclusion of driver's licenses and passports is disturbing enough. Here's where it gets really interesting.
Yeah.
Think about the target itself. This data was sitting in a system for hunting and fishing licenses.
Right, it's not Fort Knox.
Exactly. We are not talking about a high-security international border checkpoint or a federal banking node. We are talking about someone wanting to spend their Saturday morning fly fishing for base or, taking a weekend hunting trip.
Yeah, the fact that a mundane weekend hobby requires handing over passport-level data exposes a massive systemic flaw in how our society collects information.
It really does. Why do they even need that?
It points to a legacy bureaucracy that just never adapted to the modern digital threat landscape. And we really need to break down the technical difference between the types of data you just mentioned.
Yeah, let's get into
The
that.
Kinsoft report makes a very sharp, crucial distinction between data that is mutable, like credit cards, and data that is immutable, like passports.
Right. So if my credit card company texts me about a suspicious charge in another country, they just cancel the card, and I have a new piece of plastic in my mailbox 2 days later.
Exactly. The system is designed to handle that friction.
It's an inconvenience, but it's fixable.
The Kinsoft source actually describes that exact scenario as an afternoon's inconvenience. You log into your banking app, hit reset, update your automated billing for a few streaming services, and your life goes back to normal.
Yeah, I've had to do that. It's annoying, but fine.
Right. The risk is neutralized in hours because the data is mutable. It can change. But a driver's license number, a passport number, that data is essentially permanent.
You can't just click a forgot passport number link on a federal website and have a new identity generated for you.
No, you absolutely cannot.
The bureaucratic nightmare of trying to convince the State Department to issue a new passport number simply because you might be at risk of future identity theft, that sounds impossible.
It is nearly impossible, which means a leaked passport number presents what the source calls a years-long identity theft risk.
Years long. Wow.
Because cybercriminals use these immutable documents to bypass modern KYC or know your customer protocols. If a hacker has your passport number, your home address, and your phone number, they can slowly build a synthetic identity.
So they're basically creating a digital clone of you.
Exactly. They can open fraudulent lines of credit, access medical services, or impersonate you in highly sensitive corporate environments for years down the line. If we connect this to the bigger picture, this actually explains a major shift in the underground data economy.
Oh, because hackers are prioritizing government-issued documents over financial data now.
Precisely. Because the financial data is practically useless to them after a few hours.
Right. Modern fraud algorithms are too fast. A stolen credit card has a shelf life of, minutes on the dark web before the issuing bank flags the anomaly and kills the card?
Sometimes even seconds. But a stolen passport number, that is viable for a decade. It commands a much higher price on underground forums.
That makes total sense.
So finding 3 million of them aggregated in a poorly defended hunting license database, that is an absolute goldmine for an advanced persistent threat group.
Which brings us to the mechanics. How did hackers actually extract 3 million highly sensitive, immutable government records? And why did it take an entire month for the public to find out their passports were compromised?
That timeline is where things get really messy.
It leads us right into the timeline of the attack and this incredibly complex world of third-party architecture.
The timeline reveals exactly how complex and, frankly, opaque these supply chain attacks are when they unfold in the real world.
Yeah, according to the Kinsoft Deep Dive, the Texas Parks and Wildlife Department itself was not the point of entry. Their internal servers, the digital steel doors from our earlier analogy, they held up perfectly.
Nobody breached the state's internal firewalls. The state IT department did their job.
Right. The failure happened across the perimeter. Instead, the attackers breached a completely external third-party vendor. It was a company contracted simply to handle the licensing process on behalf of the state.
Just a vendor doing back-end processing.
Exactly. And Texas Cyber Command actually detected the unauthorized access moving through the vendor's connection and notified the department on May 13th.
May 13th. Yet the public disclosure to the affected citizens didn't happen until mid-June.
Right. It took several weeks of silence to figure out whose data was actually affected before they could go public.
That is a massive lag time when identities are at risk.
It is. Now, as a remedy, those affected people are being offered 1 year of free credit monitoring through Kroll, and they have an enrollment deadline in September. But the core architectural pattern here is just striking.
How do you mean?
Well, The organization whose logo is on the envelope, the Texas Parks and Wildlife Department, they did nothing obviously wrong. A completely separate software supplier with authorized access to their databases got compromised.
And that supplier was effectively invisible to the end user. I mean, when a citizen buys that phishing license, they aren't thinking about the SaaS platform hosting the back-end database or processing the web traffic.
No, of course not.
They believe they are interacting exclusively with the state.
Wait, I have to stop you there. Because if I put myself in the shoes of a normal consumer, I frankly don't care about the vendor.
Right.
If I hand my data to a government agency or a major retail brand and they decide to funnel it through some invisible cloud platform or mailing house that gets hacked, I am not directing my anger at vendor XYZ. I am furious at the brand I trusted. So what does this all mean? Does the public ever actually hold the vendor accountable?
You are touching on the exact friction point the Kinstoff report emphasizes. The public does not care about the vendor, and legally and ethically they shouldn't have to.
I agree completely.
The central thesis of supply chain security is that if an organization gives customer data to a vendor, that vendor's security is now the primary organization's security. Full stop.
You can outsource the digital labor, but you cannot outsource the liability.
Exactly. Customers will hold the logo on the letterhead entirely responsible. The consumer trusted the state of Texas, not the subcontractor. This raises an important question regarding the mechanics of the timeline, actually.
The delay between May and June.
Yes. You mentioned it took from May 13th to mid-June to disclose the breach. The reason for that massive delay is that forensic investigations across different corporate boundaries are just a logistical nightmare.
Oh, I hadn't thought of that. You aren't just looking at your own servers anymore.
Right. You have to reconstruct the attacker's steps through the vendor's API logs. You have two different IT departments, two different sets of lawyers, and entirely different network architectures trying to figure out what data was pulled across the bridge between their systems.
That sounds incredibly tedious.
It feels like a massive shell game for the consumer, where their data is being silently copied and slid under dozens of different cups, and nobody knows who is lifting them up.
And every single one of those cups represents a potential point of failure. I mean, a single vulnerability in a subcontractor's code can expose millions of people, rendering the primary organization's flawless internal security totally irrelevant.
So we have established the looming vulnerability of this interconnected supply chain, and we understand the devastating long-term consequences of the immutable data that was stolen.
Yeah, the passports and IDs.
Right. For the listeners dealing with this in their own organizations, the critical question is how to actually defend against a threat operating outside your own network.
Well, the Kinstoff report gives some very clear, actionable takeaways for hardening this hidden web of risk. Let's walk through the mechanics of how a company takes back control of its vendor sprawl.
Let's do it.
The first major takeaway is about visibility. Organizations have to map and inventory every single third party that touches their customers' data.
Shadow IT is the real enemy here.
Yeah.
You cannot protect what you do not know exists.
Right.
In large enterprises, marketing teams will spin up new cloud tools, or HR will hire a new analytics vendor, and they often bypass the central security team entirely.
They just swipe a corporate card and start moving data.
Exactly. If you do not have a comprehensive technical map of exactly which external APIs have active connections to your internal databases, you are flying blind.
Okay, so once you map them, the second point addresses the legal framework. The contracts themselves must be updated.
This is a big one.
Yeah, you need to ensure your vendor agreements give your organization the explicit right to audit their security infrastructure. And you need the contractual right to demand rapid notification when things go wrong.
Because a standard security questionnaire sent once a year is no longer sufficient, companies need contractual teeth to perform continuous monitoring.
Like we saw with the Texas timeline.
Right. Delays in notification leave consumers incredibly vulnerable. If a vendor detects an anomaly, the contract must mandate that they alert the primary organization within hours, not weeks.
The third takeaway is perhaps the most fundamental shift in how businesses treat information, and that is data minimization. The rule is deceptively simple.
Very simple in theory, hard in practice.
Totally. If you do not absolutely need to store a driver's license or a passport number to conduct your core business, you must delete it.
This is where organizations create their own worst nightmares. Data storage is incredibly cheap now, so companies have developed a habit of hoarding everything.
Yes. It reminds me of someone who keeps every single physical paper receipt they have ever received for years stuffed inside their wallet.
Oh, man. We all know someone like that.
Right. Over time, that wallet becomes a massive, bulging, uncomfortable brick. If you lose that wallet, it is an absolute disaster because your entire chronological financial history is in there.
And a lot of useless paper.
Exactly. The solution isn't to go out and buy a heavier titanium wallet. The solution is to throw away the receipts you don't actually need.
Applying that to database architecture is brilliant. Companies hoard data just in case. They collect the passport numbers, the detailed background checks, the extensive demographic profiles, and they just sit on them in active directories.
Just waiting to be stolen.
Right. They think it might be useful for a future marketing algorithm or some unspecified analytics project down the road.
They are just stuffing more useless receipts into the digital wallet, completely ignoring the liability it creates.
By doing so, they are actively turning their databases into high-value targets. They are artificially creating the exact payloads that advanced persistent threat groups are hunting for.
Because if it's not there, it can't be stolen.
Exactly. Data minimization isn't just a compliance checklist for privacy laws. It is a core mechanical defense strategy. If the data does not exist on your servers, it cannot be exfiltrated through a compromised vendor API.
Okay, the final practical takeaway from the source applies even when a vendor does legitimately need access, and it focuses on network segmentation.
Super important.
A supplier should only be able to reach the specific isolated data they need to execute their specific function and absolutely nothing more.
In cybersecurity, this is the principle of least privilege, which is often tied to zero trust architecture. If we go back to your physical house analogy.
Like house sitter.
Yeah. The vendor who waters your plants needs access to the garden hose. They do not need the key to your home office where you keep your unencrypted tax returns.
Give them access to the hose, not the safe.
Yet, in corporate IT, we constantly see legacy integrations, where a simple mailing vendor is given overarching administrative access to an entire customer database just because it was easier to set up 10 years ago.
Which is just a disaster waiting to happen.
The Kinsoft report summarizes this entire defensive posture with a perfect closing sentiment. Stay patched. Stay skeptical. You must maintain a baseline level of healthy paranoia regarding the infrastructure of the platforms you rely on.
Well, to bring this all together for you listening, we have covered some serious ground today. We started with the quiet disclosure of the Texas Parks and Wildlife supply chain breach, which ultimately compromised the personal security of over 3 million people.
Over a fishing license.
Right. We analyzed the mechanics of why immutable data, those government IDs and passport numbers, allows hackers to bypass modern fraud algorithms and build synthetic identities over a span of years.
We also unpacked the core architectural flaw of modern enterprise, why invisible API connections to third-party vendors are the most dangerous weak link in digital security today, and why the logo on the letterhead will always absorb the legal and reputational damage.
We looked at the mechanics of fighting back, illuminating shadow IT by mapping your vendors, demanding continuous audit rights in your contracts, segmenting network access to the absolute minimum required, and, of course, stopping that dangerous habit of hoarding data like old receipts in an overstuffed wallet.
All critical steps.
But before we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over, something that builds on the implications of the Kinsoft report.
The broader societal impact of this infrastructure problem.
Exactly. The source makes it crystal clear that right now, today, customers fiercely hold the main organization responsible for a third-party breach. You get mad at the brand you know.
Right, the logo on the letterhead.
But as these invisible supply chain breaches become an almost daily occurrence, as millions of records are leaked month after month through software platforms we have never even heard of, will consumer psychology eventually shift?
That's a good point. If the underlying digital architecture is fundamentally broken, do we just get used to the noise?
Will we reach a point of global breach fatigue, a point where consumers simply stop blaming the brands altogether because we accept a grim reality? The moment our data enters any digital ecosystem anywhere on Earth, it is inherently vulnerable.
It's a bleak thought.
It is. Does the very concept of brand trust even survive a future where every single company shares a leaky, interconnected supply chain?
It is a profound question. If absolute security is a myth and everyone's data is perpetually exposed through invisible vendors, the entire foundation of consumer trust might have to be redefined.
Something to think about the next time you are asked to hand over your passport number just to go on a weekend fishing trip. Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive. Stay curious, stay skeptical, and we will catch you next time.